I was 9 years old when I first saw the door. Not just any door, the one at the bottom of the east hallway in St. Warden's Orphanage. A heavy, crooked thing made of splintered wood, darker than any other door in the building. 5 rusted nails stabbed through its edges like jagged teeth. It looked like it was trying to hold something in, or keep something out. We weren't allowed near it. Not even close. Sister Mary called it the sealed sin. That's what she whispered once, her voice shaking like the broken radiator in the boys' dorm. Every kid knew the rules. They were scribbled in red crayon and taped right above the cafeteria window, written in a child's hand that had long since disappeared. 1. Don't ask about the basement. 2. Never go past the east hallway after sunset. 3. If you hear knocking, cover your ears. 4. The door is not for you. No one ever explained them. No one dared to break them. And yet we all thought about it. The door had a way of calling you without making a sound. The hallway it lived in was always cold. Even in summer when the sun baked the stone courtyard, that stretch of corridor stayed gray and shivering. If you passed by it quickly, you'd feel the chill brush your neck, like something had just missed grabbing you. At night, the walls groaned like old men. Pipes rattled behind them, moaning through the ceilings. I remember lying in my creaky metal bed, watching shadows twist across the ceiling, hearing what I told myself were just footsteps above. Only there were no rooms above us. Sometimes it knocked. Just once. A sharp rap like a knuckle on wood. It came so sudden, so clean, it didn't sound like part of the house. It sounded alive. The first time I heard it, I froze under the blanket, heart beating like a hammer in my chest. I thought it was a dream. I waited for someone else to react. But the other boys just turned over and went on sleeping. Like they didn't hear a thing. But I did. I always did. And every time I walked past the east hallway, I swear those nails looked a little looser. Sister Mary warned us never to ask questions. She'd grip your wrist and squeeze hard if you mentioned the door. That place, she'd say, eyes darting like a hunted animal, is where the devil touched this house. The others were content with the warning. They avoided the hallway like a plague. But me? I needed to know. Something about that door didn't feel like danger. It felt like a secret that wanted to be told. A secret wrapped in old wood and rusted nails, waiting for someone to peel it open. I didn't know it yet, but the orphanage didn't just hold children. It held things forgotten, things buried. And one night, when the rules were broken, it would open. It always opens, eventually. There's something odd about the way this place breathes. St. Warden's doesn't creak like an old house. It exhales. Long, tired sighs through the cracks in the walls. Like the building remembers more than we're supposed to. Mornings always feel the same here. Cold floors. Dry toast. A prayer mumbled too fast. Miss Eleanor, the headmistress, drags her feet like she doesn't even want to be awake. The other orphans just stare at their plates, chewing like machines. But I keep glancing at that basement door. I try not to make it obvious. Paolo doesn't like it when you stare. He walks the halls with that crooked back and dead expression, always holding that silver pocket watch in his hand. Click. Snap. Click. Snap. Like a metronome for our misery. You're doing it again, Noah whispered to me once at breakfast. He was 2 years younger than me, maybe 9. Sharp kid, always sketching weird stuff on the back of homework papers. Looking at the door. Don't you know what they say? What do they say? I asked, already knowing the answer. Noah looked around, lowered his voice. They say the door breathes too. At night. I didn't ask who they were. I just nodded. Because I knew. That night, I stayed awake. Everyone else in the dorm had drifted off, lulled to sleep by the wind scratching at the windows and the hum of the ancient radiator. I stared at the ceiling, the cracked plaster above my bed forming shapes I didn't like. Then I heard it. Not loud. Not clear. But there. Knock. 3 knocks. Slow. Faint. From somewhere below the floor. I sat up, heart tight in my chest. Noah, in the bed across the room, was already sitting too. He whispered, "Did you hear it?" I nodded slowly. Yeah. We didn't say anything else. We just sat there, staring at the wooden floor like it might peel back and show us something we weren't supposed to see. Next morning, nothing was mentioned. Not by the teachers. Not by Paolo. But everyone was a little quieter. Like the whole orphanage had taken a breath and was now holding it. Then came the rules. Pinned to the hallway outside the kitchen. Same old list, typed neatly yellow paper, edges curled with age. But now there was a 4th rule. Rule 4, do not speak to the knocking. My stomach turned when I read it. It hadn't been there yesterday. I know because I checked them every morning, almost like a habit. The rules were always the same, until now. That day, I noticed something else. Eva, the small girl with the white rabbit plush, wouldn't let go of my hand. She clung to me like her bones had frozen, eyes too wide for her face. "They're calling me," she said softly. "Who is?" I asked. "The ones under the door." She blinked slow, her voice almost dreamy. "They said they miss having friends." That night, I watched her sleep with the rabbit clutched to her chest. She looked peaceful, but her lips were moving in silence. I didn't sleep. I listened. The wind howled. The pipes hissed. And from deep, deep below us, knock, knock, knock. Then silence. But not just any silence. This one felt like it had weight. Like it sat on my chest. Watching. That was the first time I realized something. It wasn't the basement that was locked up. It was us. And whatever was on the other side of that door, it was waiting for someone to open it. Maybe even me. And maybe, just maybe, I already had. It was raining again. That soft, endless kind of rain that slides down old windows and fills the air with a smell of mold and memories. At St. Warden's, the rain didn't just soak the walls, it crept into your bones. We weren't allowed to light candles after lights out, but I had stolen one from the chapel. I kept it under my bed with a box of matches. That night, I lit it and let it flicker near the corner, where the damp had started curling the wallpaper like dead skin. That's when I heard her crying. It was soft, like someone trying not to be heard. I pulled on my socks and stepped out into the hallway. The candle in my hand cast long shadows that danced like broken puppets across the walls. The sound was coming from the far end, near the storage room. "Eva?" I whispered. She was sitting against the wall, knees hugged to her chest, her stuffed rabbit in her lap. Her little fingers twisted its ears nervously. She was one of the youngest, maybe 7. Pale, quiet, and always carrying that rabbit. "They were whispering again," she said, not looking up. "Who was?" I asked, kneeling beside her. "The ones behind the door," she murmured. "They say the rules are changing." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with her until her hands stopped shaking. Then I walked her back to her room, tucked her in, and stayed until her breathing slowed into sleep. I couldn't sleep that night. The wind clawed at the windows, and somewhere deep below the floorboards something thudded, like a fist against wood. The next morning, Eva was gone. The matron said she must have run away. "Happens sometimes," she told us with a shrug. "Kids don't always like rules." But Eva wasn't the kind of girl who ran. Her bed was still warm when I touched it. Her shoes were still lined up neatly beneath the frame. And on her pillow, the rabbit. Only now it had no eyes. Just empty threads where they'd been plucked out. And I swear, the basement door had fewer nails in it than before. I counted them. Twice. The old wood was splintering around the edges, like it had been breathing. Or maybe pressing outward. There was something else, too. Written in chalk, faintly on the door. Rule 4, never cry after dark. We never had a rule 4. Not before. I tried to tell Paolo. I found him outside, smoking near the well behind the greenhouse. "She's missing," I said. "And there's something wrong with the door. There's another rule now." He didn't look at me, just blew a long trail of smoke into the gray air. "There's always been 4 rules, Jason," he said flatly. "You must have just forgotten." But I hadn't. I never forget. When I turned to walk away, I caught my reflection in the rain-streaked window beside us. It was smiling. I wasn't. And that night, the door knocked back. 3 slow knocks. Like something was waiting. Like it already knew my name. I didn't light the candle that night. I just lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. Counting the breaths I took. Wondering how many more I'd get before it came through. The days after Eva vanished felt heavier. The halls of the orphanage had always been quiet, but now they were dead. No laughter. No fights over extra bread. Just the creak of floorboards and that sickening feeling like someone was always just behind you. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her rabbit. Soggy. Dirty. Left right by the basement door, like someone had placed it there on purpose. The door was still shut, but something about it had changed. The nails looked newer, like someone had ripped them out and hammered them back again. Miss Valerie said Eva had been adopted suddenly. No warning. No goodbye. I didn't believe her. Neither did most of the kids. Especially not after the second night. That's when we all heard it. A soft knock. Then another. I sat up in bed and held my breath. The knocking came again. 3 slow knocks. Not from the front door. From the floor. From under us. The next morning, I went back to the hallway with the basement door. I stared at it for a long time. I thought about the rules, especially the second one. Don't speak to it, even if it knows your name. What the hell does that mean? I leaned closer and pressed my ear to the wall beside the door. Nothing. But when I pulled back, I noticed something just above the floor trim. Scratches. Little ones, hidden under layers of chipped paint. They looked like letters. I knelt down and scratched away at the flaking white paint with my fingernail. Bit by bit, a name started to appear. Paulo. My chest tightened. I stood up and looked around. Nobody was watching. I tapped the wall around the name, feeling for anything loose. One panel near the bottom sounded hollow. I pried at it with a spoon I'd snuck from the dining hall. It popped free after a few tries. Inside was a narrow space, like a secret slot in the wall. Dust spilled out, and with it, something crumpled. A piece of newspaper. Yellowed and brittle. The headline read, "Fire at St. Warden's Orphanage. No survivors confirmed." No survivors? The article was from 1873. It mentioned a wing of the building catching fire after a candle tipped over. Dozens of children and caretakers had died. But then, in small faded ink, there was a line at the bottom. One child's name was found scratched into the stone, Paulo. I didn't know what to do. I sat there for a long time, reading and rereading the name. My fingers were trembling. Paulo wasn't just some strict caretaker. He'd been here before. A long time ago. Was he a survivor? How old was he? How could he still be alive? My thoughts were spinning so fast, I almost didn't notice the noise behind me. A small, sharp sound. Tap. Tap. I turned slowly. The hallway was empty. But the basement door, one of the nails had fallen out. It lay on the floor, still warm. The rest of the day blurred. I kept my head down. Paulo never spoke to me, but I caught him watching. Eyes like wet stones. That night, I dreamed of fire. I saw children running through the halls, screaming, skin glowing red like candles melting. And Paulo, standing perfectly still in the middle of it all. Watching. Smiling. When I woke up, my hand was bleeding. 3 letters had been scratched into my palm. P.A.U. I never finished the last letter. I couldn't. And the knocking didn't stop. It was just after midnight when I woke up drenched in sweat. The kind of sweat that doesn't come from heat, but from fear. Outside, the rain tapped lightly against the windows. Gentle, almost calming, if not for the sound that followed it. Knock. 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 3 slow, deliberate thuds. Coming from that door. The one that had been nailed shut since the day I arrived. The basement door. I sat up in bed, barely breathing. My heart was pounding so loud it felt like it was echoing through the room. I wasn't sure if I was still dreaming. Maybe the sound had been part of a nightmare. I hoped it was. But then it happened again. Knock. 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 This time slower. Louder. I looked across the room. The other boys were asleep, curled into their thin blankets, unmoved by the noise. How could they not hear it? I slid out of bed. My legs were trembling, but I didn't stop. Curiosity has a way of overpowering fear, even when you know it shouldn't. I walked out of the room and into the hallway, the wood floor creaking softly beneath my feet. The hallway was dark. Only the emergency light above the stairs gave off a weak, orange glow. Shadows danced on the walls like they were waiting for something. I crept down the hall until I stood in front of the basement door. It looked just as it always had, old, worn, and covered with nails. Big, rusted ones. The wood around them was splintered and dry. A small paper was still pinned to the frame. Rule 3. Do not knock on the basement door. My breath caught. I hadn't knocked. I swear I hadn't. But someone or something had. And now, my fingers were moving on their own. I reached out, barely realizing what I was doing, and pressed my palm to the cold wood. It was vibrating, like something inside was waiting. I whispered without thinking, "Is someone there?" The silence that followed was worse than any sound I'd ever heard. I could feel it staring back at me, something beyond the wood, listening. Then, knock, knock, knock. This time it didn't come from inside the basement. It came from behind me. I turned around fast. My breath caught in my throat. Nothing was there. Just the hallway. Silent. Still. But I wasn't alone. Somehow I knew it. I backed away from the door, slowly, my eyes scanning the dark corners. The floorboards felt like they were breathing beneath my feet. That night, I barely slept. And the next morning, when we gathered in the dusty dining hall, I noticed something. 2 things, actually. First, one of the younger boys, Benji, had a deep scratch on his arm. He said he got it from a dream, that something with long fingers had reached for him. And second, the paper on the basement door had changed. There was a new line added beneath Rule 3. In red ink, it read, "If it knocks back, do not answer." I felt sick, because I already had. The next morning felt wrong. The air was too still, like even the dust didn't dare move. No birds chirped outside the cracked windows. No pipes groaned. No whispers from the halls. Just silence, thick and heavy, clinging to the walls. I hadn't slept much. After hearing the knock echo back through the door last night, I sat awake in my bed, heart thudding, thoughts racing. I thought about Eva. Her rabbit. Her wide eyes staring into the dark before she vanished. I needed answers. And the only person who always seemed to be standing too close to the truth was Paolo. He never aged, never smiled, and he never looked surprised by anything, like he'd already seen it all before. That morning, instead of going to breakfast with the others, I slipped away and followed him. He walked through the halls like a ghost, quiet and precise. He moved past the old library, down through a service hallway I had never dared enter. The walls were darker here, warped and wet. The paint bubbled like skin burned too long under the sun. The floor sloped, and the air smelled of mildew and old blood. Paolo reached a rusted metal door. He didn't knock, just pressed a hand against the center and whispered something I couldn't hear. It creaked open. I waited for him to go through, then slipped in behind, careful not to let the door slam. The space inside was wrong. Not just strange, wrong. It looked like a chapel, but one that had been buried alive. A rotting wooden altar stood at the far end. Melted candles had turned to stumps, the wax forming patterns on the floor like spiderwebs. And in the center of it all, under a dim, flickering lantern, Paolo was kneeling. He had a small knife. Not clean. Old. Black with time, and something else I didn't want to guess. In front of him sat a book bound in something that might have once been leather, if leather bled. He was chanting. Low. Monotone. His voice didn't sound like a man's. It sounded like wind through dead trees. My skin crawled. He's waking, Paolo whispered. He smells your curiosity. I stepped back. The floorboard creaked. Too loud. Paolo didn't flinch. You shouldn't be here, Jason. I had to know, I said, my voice trembling. What's behind that door? He sighed, and for the first time, I saw something like sadness in his eyes. He looked older suddenly, not in body, but in weight, like centuries were pressing down on his shoulders. I tried to keep it quiet, keep it buried, but the rules only hold for so long. Children break rules, especially the curious ones. He stood slowly, the book closing with a sickening thud. This place, it's not just an orphanage. It's a prison. For what? For something we were never meant to understand. Something that fed on fear, on innocence, on souls too small to fight back. The first headmaster made a deal, to keep it sealed. In exchange, one of us had to stay behind. Forever. As its warden, he stepped into the dim light. For the first time, I saw the scars. Carved into his neck, his wrists. Symbols. Circles. Words in no language I'd seen. You're the boy from the article, I whispered. The fire. The survivor. He nodded. There was no fire. That was the story we told the world. The truth is something got out, and we burned the others to stop it. My breath caught in my throat. Why me? Why now? Because the rules are failing, Paolo said, his voice breaking. And it's hungry again. We stood in silence. Just the two of us, surrounded by rot and candlelight and the weight of centuries. Then he handed me the book. Read it, he said. But only if you're willing to carry the burden. I looked down at it. My fingers trembled. The cover pulsed faintly under my touch. It felt warm. Alive. As I reached for it, I heard a whisper, not from Paolo, not from the room, but from somewhere inside the pages. It said my name. And it smiled. The rule wasn't there yesterday. I swear on my life it wasn't. But there it was now, scratched into the old wall above my bed, written in jagged strokes like someone had carved it with their fingernails. Rule number 5, when you see yourself blink, run. It didn't make any sense. I stared at the message until my eyes burned. I rubbed them, blinked, stared again. The rule stayed like a scar etched into the wood. I reached out and touched the letters. They felt fresh, like the grooves were still bleeding. All day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't tell anyone, not even Ben or Sarah. Especially not Paolo. He'd act like nothing was wrong, just like he always did. His blank eyes, always watching, always pretending. And when I passed him in the hall that morning, he looked at me like he already knew. That night, it started again. The whispering. Soft at first, like wind moving through dry leaves. Then it grew louder. Voices, but they weren't coming from outside the room. They were coming from the mirror. The orphanage had these old, cracked mirrors in every hallway. No one liked looking into them. The glass was warped, as if the mirror remembered more than it should. I usually avoided them. But tonight, something pulled me toward the one near the staircase. I stood in front of it. My reflection stared back. Same face. Same tired eyes. But something was off. I blinked. And my reflection didn't. It just kept staring. Mouth curled upward in a slow, unnatural smile. My heart started thumping. I stepped back. My reflection didn't move. That's when I remembered the rule. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to get away. The hallways stretched longer than they should have. Shadows slithered along the walls, as if they were alive. I ducked into the library, slammed the door shut, and pressed my back to it. My breathing was sharp and loud. I could hear something moving outside, slow, deliberate footsteps. They stopped right in front of the door. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. I turned and peeked through the old keyhole. Nothing there. Until I saw me. Standing in the hallway, smiling wide, eyes wide open. Not blinking. Just watching. I stumbled backward into the dark library and tripped over something soft. A blanket? No. A body. It was Eva. She was curled up on the floor, clutching her rabbit. Her eyes opened slowly, cloudy and wet. She looked up at me and whispered, "He's lying to you." "Who is?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't answer. She reached out and pointed toward the wall behind the bookshelf. There was another message. This one wasn't carved. It was burned into the wood. "Don't listen to the reflection. It serves him." I turned back toward the mirror across the room. My reflection had followed me. It was in the library now, mimicking my every move again. But when I blinked, it didn't. It just smiled and whispered my name. Not out loud, inside my head. "Jason." Something deep inside me cracked. I grabbed Eva and we fled the room, ran back to the dormitory. When I turned back, the mirror was still there. Empty. But I knew better. It was watching. Waiting. And it had shown me just enough to understand one thing. That door wasn't just hiding a demon. It was a prison for something older, deeper. And it wanted out. And it was using me to do it. The door gave way with a sigh, as if it had lungs. I felt its breath on my face, wet, warm, and wrong. My lantern's glow spilled over the first step and showed a stairway that fell into a throat of dust and cobwebs. The air smelled like old milk and copper pennies. I told myself to turn back, but my feet took the next step. And the next. Each board groaned, as though it carried the memory of children who had stepped here before me and never returned. The light flickered. I held it close and kept going. The staircase bent, then twisted. Walls tightened around me. Stone pressed so close I had to squeeze my shoulders in. Far below, something dripped in a slow, steady beat. It sounded like a clock that had forgotten time. After what felt like the length of a nightmare, the steps ended on a dirt floor. Lantern light reached only a little way, but I saw rows of small white shapes nailed to the walls. At first I thought they were shells. Then I looked closer. They were teeth. Baby teeth, neat and shining, hammered into the stone in careful lines. Beneath them sat empty cribs made of rusted iron. Each crib held a blanket folded, as if waiting for someone small to crawl back under it. I tried to breathe, but the air tasted of salt and spoiled sugar. A low hum came from everywhere at once. It was not a voice yet, more like a throat clearing before it speaks. I forced my eyes forward and saw Paolo. He knelt in the center of the chamber, back arched, head hanging. A circle of chalk surrounded him, broken in places by smears of dark red. His skin looked stretched, almost transparent. Veins pulsed beneath it like blue worms. From his spine grew thin stalks of bone that bent outward, each tipped with a child's tooth. I whispered his name. The sound crawled across the floor, and Paolo lifted his head. His eyes were gone. In their place glowed two pits of orange, like embers hidden under ash. "Jason," he said. The voice was his, but it echoed with another, deeper tone that made my ribs ache. "You should have stayed upstairs." I stepped closer. "Where is Eva? Where are the others?" He smiled, and the bone stalks on his back rattled. "Safe. If you finish what I began." I shook my head. "Tell me what's behind this." Paolo's mouth opened wider than it should. A wind pushed out, carrying words that were not words. My lantern shook, and the flame stretched toward him, pulled by that breath. "Tell more," he said when the wind died. The name thudded against the walls, and every tooth clicked in reply. The eater of forgotten things. It slept in the cellar of the old asylum. I was its first meal. I made a bargain. It kept me alive to feed it the ones no one would miss. The room darkened, though my lantern still burned. Shadows swam across the floor, gathering around the cribs. Paolo pointed a claw at me. You brought yourself to the altar. Give it your fear, and it will return what you lost. I thought of Eva's hollow eyes in my dreams, the way she tried to scream but had no mouth. I thought of all the children whose names faded from memory the moment they vanished. Forgotten things. No, I said. The hum grew louder. Teeth trembled on the walls, shook free, and rained down like hail. Something huge moved beneath the floor, lifting dust with each unseen breath. Paolo rose. His legs bent backward, snapping as they changed. He towered over me, a scarecrow of skin and bone. Then you will feed it in pieces. He lunged. I darted aside and tumbled into a crib. Iron scraped my arms. I felt blood bead, smelled fresh metal. The hum sharpened into a hungry cry. I grabbed the lantern and swung. Glass shattered against Paolo's chest. Oil and flame burst over his flesh. Fire raced along the bone stalks. Teeth popped like corn. Paolo screamed, voice splitting into many voices at once. The floor split open behind him, a black mouth ringed in nails and teeth. From its depths rose a hand made of dark smoke, long fingers tipped with silver talons. It wrapped around Paolo's burning body and dragged him toward the hole. Paolo reached for me, eyes blazing. Seal it, he gasped. Use my blood. Use the circle. He vanished into the pit. The mouth began to close, but slow, like an eye falling asleep. I tore a shard of burning wood from the crib, plunged it into the chalk circle, and carved a new line with Paolo's spilled blood. The earth shook. The hole snapped shut with a thunderous clap, crushing the last echo of Paolo's scream. Silence fell. Smoke drifted upward like lost souls. I stood alone among broken cribs and scattered teeth, the lamp's wick still glowing on the dirt. Somewhere overhead, in the orphanage halls, a child's lullaby started to play on the old piano. Soft, sweet, and terribly out of tune. I picked up the lantern's metal frame, cradled its dim ember, and began the climb back up, knowing the door was still waiting for me at the top. The basement was breathing. Not like a person, no chest rising and falling, but like the whole place was alive, exhaling damp, rotten air against my face. The moment I stepped through the door, the warmth of the orphanage above disappeared. What wrapped around me now was something colder than cold. Something ancient. The stairs groaned beneath my feet. I couldn't see where they ended, only that each step I took sank me deeper into the dark. My flashlight flickered, its beam barely touching the walls. Every surface was damp and pulsing slightly, as if veins ran through the stone. Then at the bottom I saw it. Paolo. He stood in front of a large iron circle carved into the floor. Symbols glowed faintly around it, flickering red like dying embers. His hands were soaked in something dark, thicker than blood. His eyes met mine, and I swear, they looked empty. Like he'd forgotten what it meant to be human. You came, he whispered, voice raw. I didn't answer. You saw the truth, didn't you? He said, stepping closer. About the pact. About me. About him. There was something moving just behind him, inside the iron circle. It was hard to look directly at it, like trying to focus on smoke that didn't want to stay still. A form made of shadows and bones, and teeth. Talamor. He wants out, Paolo said, smiling sadly. And I'm tired. I looked around. The floor was covered in children's shoes. Hundreds. Some were old and crumbling. Some were newer. Some I recognized. You fed him, I said quietly. I contained him, he snapped, anger breaking through his calm. Every decade, a child disappears, and he's silent. That's the price. I wanted to scream, cry, punch him, but I didn't, because deep down I already knew. The missing children, the rules, the way Paolo always knew when someone got too close to the door. What now? I asked. Paolo took a small blade from his coat and held it out to me, handle first. You take my place. You become the keeper. Or you let him out. I'm just a kid. Paolo smiled. So was I. The thing inside the circle whispered then. Not in words I understood, but in feelings, cold promises, and sharp hunger. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the ground. Visions slammed into my head, flashes of cities burning, people screaming, the sky cracking open like glass. I saw what would happen if I said no. But if I said yes, you want me to kill you? I asked, my voice barely a breath. No, Paolo whispered. You have to choose. Kill me, and seal him again. Or walk away, and he walks free. I stared at the knife. Then at Paolo. Then at the thing behind him waiting. Its shape twisted, forming a long grin, like it knew I couldn't do it. But I could. I stood, walked forward, and without a word I took the blade. Paolo knelt. I'm sorry, I whispered. He closed his eyes. I'm not, he said. I brought the blade down. The room screamed. The symbols exploded in color, blinding red and deep black. Paolo's body twisted, bones snapping as the ritual began. The air turned thick like syrup, and I couldn't breathe. But something was changing. The shadows roared, tried to rise, but the circle flared, pulling it back, dragging it down into the earth. Talamor wasn't gone. But he was bound again. For now. I stood there in the silence that followed, shaking, soaked in Paolo's blood and the creature's foul breath. My hands were no longer my own. I had crossed a line. I was the keeper now. The basement door was shut again. Not just closed, but sealed, nailed, locked, and whispering like it always did when it was hungry. I stood there, my hands still stained with Paolo's blood. My breath was shallow, like my lungs had forgotten how to trust the air. The hammer I used lay on the floor, next to his body, or what was left of it. He didn't scream in the end. He just looked at me, wide-eyed and almost grateful, like he'd waited years for someone else to carry this weight. Maybe he had. Maybe that's what he meant when he said, the door doesn't want to be watched. It wants to be remembered. I didn't understand it then. I do now. I could still feel the heat from the ritual fire behind me, the way it had glowed not with warmth, but warning. The shadows moved even after the flames went out, like the darkness had a mind of its own. It breathed. It watched. It waited. And above all, it remembered. I climbed the creaking steps back up into the main hall of the orphanage. It was too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels loud in your ears, like something is holding its breath. I expected someone to be waiting. Miss Harrow, Father Dell, even the other kids. But no one was there. Just Eva. She stood at the end of the hallway, holding her stuffed rabbit, the one we'd found lying by the door when she vanished. It was cleaner than it should have been. Her dress was different too. Ironed, untouched by the mud and ash from the basement. But it was her eyes that told me the truth. They were too still. Too cold. Eva? I whispered, stepping closer. She blinked slowly, then smiled. But it wasn't her smile. I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't ask who had brought her back. Some answers you already know, even when they sit quietly in the corners of your mind, pretending to be doubt. I took her hand gently. She let me. It felt like holding smoke inside a glove. We walked back to the dormitory together. The hallway lights flickered as we passed, one by one. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at my desk, pulled out the old rules list, and tore it in half. The paper crumbled in my fingers like dead leaves. Then I wrote them again. A fresh list. Clean lines. No blood this time. Just truth. The rules. Don't go near the basement door after dark. Never touch the nails. They're not just wood and iron. If you hear knocking, knock back, and it will stop. Just once. If something cries behind the door, ignore it. It's not one of us. Don't speak to Paolo after midnight. Even if he says your name. Don't forget. It feeds on forgetting. I pinned the new list to the wall beside my bed. I underlined number 7 twice. The morning came gray and quiet. Outside, the sky bled soft rain. Inside, the orphanage carried on like it always had. No one asked about Paolo. No one asked about the screaming last night. The world had already moved on. But I hadn't. And neither had it. Because as I walked past the mirror near the staircase, I caught a glimpse of myself. I was standing still. But my reflection? It smiled. And blinked. I didn't. Not this time. Not yet. I had started sleeping with the lights on. A small night lamp from the storage room, probably from some forgotten donor years ago, flickered in soft amber. I didn't care. I just needed to see everything. Since Paolo's blood sealed the door, silence had returned to St. Warden's. An empty kind of silence. Like the house was waiting. The children stopped waking up screaming. The walls didn't creak as much. Even the wind outside seemed to whisper less. But Eva, she sat alone now. Blank, staring into space. Her eyes no longer searched for anyone. No tears, no words. Just that quiet stillness that only the broken wear. I asked her once, "Do you remember the basement?" She didn't blink. Didn't even flinch. She just said, "I saw myself in the dark." That was the last thing she ever said to me. The mirror in the hallway near the library had always been cracked down the middle. It was long, old, the kind that warped you at the edges. I never liked passing by it. But that night, something made me stop. It was around 3:09 a.m. I remember the time because I had started writing the rules again. Fresh ink, fresh page. I wanted to make sure the new ones were there for the next child. The real rules. The ones they would never find in the guidebook. Rule 6, don't forget. It feeds on forgetting. As I walked down the hall toward the washroom, I caught a flicker in the mirror. Not light, movement. My own reflection had paused. I hadn't. My foot was mid-step, arm swinging forward, body leaning. But in the mirror, I was still. Frozen. Eyes locked with mine. My breath caught. I stared. It stared back. Then, it blinked. I didn't. My knees buckled slightly. I backed away slowly, the boards under me moaning with every shift. The reflection didn't move. Its eyes followed me. Its grin began to spread. It grinned. I didn't. It was a wide smile. Too wide. Its lips stretched past what was human, peeling at the corners like wet paper. And then it raised its hand, slowly, pressing its palm against the glass. I turned and ran. Down the hall, up the stairs, into my dorm. Slammed the door, locked it. Pushed the old bookshelf in front, just in case. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, lamp flickering, heart knocking against my ribs. I stared at the wall until my eyes dried out. The kind of stare where you hope if you don't blink, you won't see something move. In the morning, I checked the hallway mirror. It was normal again. Just a mirror. Crack still there. Reflection behaved like it should. Almost. Except, there were 5 fingerprints in the dust. 5 small prints pressed into the glass from inside. And they weren't mine. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. Some things you don't survive by speaking aloud. I taped the rewritten list of rules behind the old furnace, where only the curious ones would find it, the brave ones, or the foolish. It ended with this. Rule 7. If your reflection ever blinks before you, don't run. You won't make it. I don't look into mirrors anymore. Not even puddles. Not even spoons. Because sometimes, when I forget myself, I think I see something smiling. And when I blink, it doesn't.